to 3 a.m. Tales.
Hello, Sir Bob. This is the experience of a friend, shared with permission. You can call me Melanie. This story isn't mine. It's about my friend, Mila. Mila has always loved to travel. Before I got married, I used to go with her on her trips abroad. Different countries, different cultures, different experiences. But after I settled down, my priorities changed. I stayed behind while she kept going. Traveling became her life, and wherever she went, she always brought something back. Souvenirs, small trinkets, little objects that reminded her of the places she'd been. Over time, she collected so many that she would joke about building her own museum someday. That's how much she loved it. Because of all her travels, Mila slowly stopped believing in superstitions. She would always say, "Every place has its own beliefs. What's bad luck in one country might be good luck in another." To her, they were just stories, nothing more. But that belief changed the moment she bought something from Arizona. It was a dream catcher. She found it in a small souvenir shop. It wasn't big, but it stood out. Delicate, detailed. The seller told her it was special. He claimed it was an antique, made by an old Native American tribe. Mila didn't believe him. To her, it didn't make sense. If it were truly an antique, why would it be sold in a simple souvenir shop? Why not an antique store? Still, she liked it. So she bought it and brought it home. The moment she arrived, something felt off. Not to her, but to someone else. Their house helper, Lorna. As soon as she saw Mila, she frowned. She said something was wrong, that Mila's aura didn't feel right. She told her to bathe in salt, to cleanse whatever she brought home. Mila didn't believe her, but just to avoid an argument, she did it anyway. The next day, she started unpacking her luggage, carefully taking out each souvenir. Then she reached for the dream catcher. Without thinking much, she hung it in her room. And that's when everything began. That night, she had a dream. But it wasn't just a dream. It felt real. She saw a person, faceless, standing in front of her. At first, she didn't understand what it was doing. Then she noticed its hands, moving, scraping, peeling something slowly. She stepped closer. And that's when she realized it wasn't just anything. It was a human head. The skin was being peeled off. The scalp scraped, removed. The hair still attached. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't move. She watched as the hair was cleaned, carefully, almost respectfully. Then it was woven together, turned into something like a wig. But she knew it wasn't fake. It was real, human. Then suddenly, she couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, her throat closing. Instinctively, she reached for her neck and felt it. Hair, braided hair, wrapped tightly around her throat, strangling her. That's when she woke up, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. She thought it was just a nightmare. But the next night, it happened again. The same dream, the same faceless figure, the same horrifying act. And again, she couldn't breathe, the hair tightening around her neck. Night after night, for 3 consecutive nights. That's when fear truly set in, because it wasn't normal anymore. It was repeating, and it always felt real. That's when she started thinking, what changed? What did she bring home? Then she looked at it, the dream catcher. She took it down, held it in her hands, and examined it closely. That's when she noticed something. The threads, they weren't ordinary fibers. They were braided, too detailed, too realistic. And the more she looked, the more she felt sick, because they looked exactly like the hair from her dreams. The frame wasn't wood. It looked like leather, but not ordinary leather. It looked pale, almost like skin. That's when she understood, or at least she thought she did, without hesitation. She burned it. Right away. She didn't care if it was expensive. She didn't care if it was rare. All she knew was it didn't belong in her home. As the flames consumed it, she felt something. Relief, but also fear. Because she started to realize, what if it really was what the seller claimed? An antique. But not just any antique. Something made from real human parts. She remembered the figure in her dreams, the way it dressed, like a warrior, like something out of old Western films. That's when the thought became stronger. What if that dream catcher wasn't meant to protect dreams? What if it trapped something else instead? After that, she went to church, got holy water, and cleansed her room, her house, everything. When she told Lorna, the older woman just nodded, as if she already knew. She said, "That's why your aura felt dark. You brought something back with you. Something that wasn't meant to be taken." After that, the dreams stopped. The nightmares disappeared. And Mila was never the same again. For the first time, after all her travels, after all her doubts, she finally believed that not everything we bring home is meant to stay with us. Hello, Sir Bob. My name is Jarek. I've been listening to your stories for a long time now, and I've always wanted to share one of my own. I just hope this one gets noticed. Because even though it didn't happen directly to me, it's something I personally witnessed, and something I can never forget. This story is about the cousin of one of my closest friends. For privacy, I'll change the names. I have a friend named Janella. She comes from a very well-off family. Not just comfortable, but the kind of wealth that you immediately notice the moment you step inside their home. One time, she invited our whole friend group to her cousin Noelle's birthday. We were excited, of course. Free food, big house, and a chance to experience something different. But none of us expected what we were about to see. When we arrived, we were completely stunned. Noelle's house wasn't just big, it was massive. The kind of house you only see in magazines or movies. Tall ceilings, wide glass windows, perfectly polished floors. Everything looked expensive, but at the same time, it felt warm. Not the kind of place that makes you feel small, but the kind that welcomes you in. That's actually what surprised me the most. Growing up, I had met people who pretended to be rich, and those were usually the ones who looked down on others. But here, it was different. Noelle's family was kind, approachable. They treated us like we belonged there. But out of everything in that house, there was one thing that immediately caught all of our attention. The staircase. I don't even know how to properly describe it, but it didn't look like something you'd normally see in a modern home. It was made of dark wood, deep, rich, almost black in color. And the railings, they weren't just simple metal bars. They were curved, detailed, almost artistic, like something handcrafted a long time ago. It was a mix of wood and iron, old but elegant. And what made it stand out even more was the rest of the house. Everything else was white. White walls, white furniture, white decorations. Bright, clean, modern. And then, right in the center of it all, that staircase. Dark, heavy, almost out of place. Naturally, we asked about it, and that's when Noelle's parents proudly told us its story. According to them, that staircase didn't come from our state. It came from Mexico. They said it was taken from an old convent, a religious place that had been abandoned for unknown reasons. No one really knew why it was closed. No clear history, no proper explanation, just abandoned. They said the staircase was over 300 years old, and because of that, it became the centerpiece of the house. Whenever guests came over, especially important ones like businessmen or politicians, that staircase was always part of the conversation. At the time, we were amazed. It felt like we were looking at a piece of history, something rare, something valuable. But later that night, Janella told us something that completely changed the way we looked at it. She said, "All the stories you hear about that staircase, those are just the good ones." We laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But the look on her face, it wasn't playful, it was serious. That's when she started telling us what really happened. Back when the staircase first arrived, the house wasn't finished yet. Construction was still ongoing, and the workers were the ones staying there overnight. At first, everything was normal, but after a few days, they started noticing something strange. At night, whenever they walked past the staircase, they would hear whispers. Not loud, just soft, like someone quietly talking or praying. Some of them tried to ignore it. They told themselves it was just the wind, or maybe voices from outside. But the whispers kept happening, every night. Then, things got worse. One of the workers claimed that while he was on his way to the bathroom, he saw a figure. A woman, dressed in black, holding a rosary, walking slowly near the staircase, murmuring prayers. When he told the others, no one believed him at first, until someone else saw it too. This time, the figure wasn't moving. It was just standing at the top of the staircase, watching them. They described her as a nun, her face pale, her expression unreadable, but her eyes focused, locked onto them. That was the moment everything changed. The workers panicked. Some of them refused to continue working. Others packed their things and left immediately. The construction almost stopped completely. Noelle's parents had to convince them to come back. They doubled their pay just to finish installing the staircase. But even after that, the fear didn't go away. While working, they would play loud music. Not for entertainment, but to drown out the sound of prayers, whispers. After the staircase was finally installed, the entire house was blessed. Everyone thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Because even after the blessing, the presence stayed. Noel himself started experiencing it. At night, when everything was quiet, he would hear something. Soft, sorrowful, a voice. Praying. Not in English, but in Spanish. He said it sounded like someone crying while praying, like a voice filled with grief or regret. And the strangest part was, it always came from the staircase. At that point, they didn't know what to do anymore. The house had already been blessed, but whatever was there, it didn't leave. Until someone suggested something unusual. They said, "What if the spirit doesn't understand the blessing?" Because the prayers were done in a different language. And if the spirit was from somewhere else, then maybe it never understood that it was being told to leave. It sounded strange, but they were desperate. So Noelle's parents made a decision. They contacted a priest, all the way from Mexico. When the priest arrived, he didn't take it lightly. He carefully inspected the staircase, listened to their experiences, and then performed a blessing, this time in Spanish. After that, everything stopped. No more whispers, no more prayers, no more sightings. Just silence. Janella told us that ever since then, nothing strange has happened again. The staircase remained, but whatever was attached to it was finally gone. Then she laughed, trying to lighten the mood, and said something I'll never forget. Maybe ghosts are like people. They need to understand you first, before they listen. And then she added, maybe that's why some places stay haunted, even after so many blessings. She smiled and joked. Next time, maybe we should ask what color their passport is, just to be sure. We all laughed, but deep inside, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because that night, as I looked at that staircase one last time, I couldn't help but wonder if something had really been standing there before, watching, waiting, and praying in a language no one around it could understand. Good day, Sir Bob. This is probably the creepiest experience I've ever had. Just call me Mike. Even now, as an adult, I still dream about it sometimes, about my mom's figurines. When I think back to my childhood, it was actually a happy one. Simple, peaceful, the kind of life where your only problem is what game to play next. My mom had a hobby. She loved collecting old items, figurines, vases, perfume bottles, even wedding souvenirs from people we barely knew. She always said, someday, these might be useful. My dad didn't agree. He used to complain that it was just clutter, that one day she'd end up throwing everything away anyway. All of those items were kept in a small storage room under the stairs. It wasn't big, but it felt like a different world. For some reason, I loved staying there. Whenever I had nothing to do, I'd bring my coloring books inside, sit on the floor, and just enjoy the quiet. It had this strange, calming smell, like old perfume mixed with wood and dust. It felt peaceful, safe. Until one afternoon, it wasn't. I had just come home from school, exhausted. I went straight to that little room, lay down on the floor, and before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up because someone was calling my name. At first, I thought it was my mom. The voice was soft, almost like a whisper. Hey, come here. But something felt wrong. The voice was too small, too close. I slowly sat up and looked around the room. Everything seemed normal at first, until I noticed them. 3 angel figurines, placed right in front of me. I was sure they weren't that close before I fell asleep. They were small, white, with wings, hands clasped like they were praying, completely ordinary, except they were moving. Not fast, not dramatic, just slowly, inching closer. My heart started pounding. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. Then I heard it again. Come here. And this time, I knew exactly where it was coming from. The figurines. Their tiny mouths weren't moving, but the voices were coming from them. They called my name again, soft, almost playful, but there was something wrong with it, something not human. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. My body felt cold, like all the warmth had been drained out of me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should run, or scream, or just stay still. Then one of them moved again, closer. That's when I lost it. I turned and ran as fast as I could out of that room. I was crying, shaking. I couldn't even speak properly. I ran straight to my dad and hugged him tightly. He kept asking me what happened, but I couldn't explain. The words just wouldn't come out. All I could do was cry. Eventually, I got so exhausted, I fell asleep in his arms. When I woke up later, I told my mom everything, every detail, but she didn't believe me. She just smiled and said, "You probably just had a bad dream." But I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. After that day, I never went into that room alone again. Even passing by it made me uncomfortable, like something inside was watching, waiting. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, I noticed something. The figurines were gone. I didn't ask about them at first. Honestly, I was just relieved. But one day, I overheard my mom talking. She had sold them to a friend, someone who also liked collecting things. For a moment, I felt guilty, like maybe I overreacted. like maybe it really was just a dream. But that feeling didn't last long. A few months later, that same friend came back. She returned the figurines. No arguments, no request for a refund. She just gave them back. My mom asked her why, and all she said was, "They don't match my home decor." That was it. No explanation, no complaints. But the way she said it, the way she avoided eye contact, it felt like she wasn't telling the whole truth. And deep down, I knew she experienced something too. To this day, those figurines are still in that room under the stairs, untouched, unmoved, just there. I'm older now. I understand more things. I try to be rational, but every now and then, I still dream about them. 3 small angel figurines, slowly moving closer, calling my name. Hi, Sir Bob. My name is Brian. What I'm about to share happened when I was still living with my grandmother, and to this day, it remains one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. We called her Grandma Jackie. She was my father's mother, and for most of my childhood, she was the one who raised me. My parents were both working abroad, so it was just the 2 of us in that house. Grandma Jackie was kind, but she was also very strict. She grew up in a household shaped by discipline. Her father had been a soldier back in the old days, so everything in their home followed rules, proper manners, respect, obedience. And that was exactly how she raised me. Despite that, I loved her deeply, because behind that strictness, she cared for me in ways I didn't fully understand back then. She had her routines. Every day she would sit beside her sewing machine, working on clothes, repairing fabrics, sometimes for neighbors, sometimes for extra income. Right beside her sewing machine was her favorite rocking chair. That chair was old, the wood slightly worn, the sound of it creaking softly whenever it moved. But to her, it was special. She would often sit there when she was tired, gently rocking back and forth, sometimes humming, sometimes just staring into space. I never questioned it. To me, it was just her chair. Until one day, everything changed. I had just come home from school. I was in my 3rd year of high school at the time. Even before I reached the door, while I was still climbing the stairs, I could already hear Grandma talking. At first, I didn't think anything was strange. I assumed we had a visitor, maybe a neighbor, or one of her customers. Her voice sounded normal, casual, like she was having a conversation. So I walked in, expecting to see someone sitting with her. But when I entered the house, there was no one there. Just Grandma Jackie, sitting in front of her sewing machine, calmly stitching fabric, as if everything was normal. I looked around. The room was empty. No extra slippers, no voices, no movement. Just her. Still, I tried to brush it off. Maybe the visitor had just left. So I greeted her respectfully. "Grandma, I'm home." She looked at me and smiled warmly, the kind of smile she always gave me. Then I asked, "Grandma, who were you talking to?" She paused for a moment, then slowly raised her hand and pointed at the rocking chair beside her. My heart dropped. She said, "Go on, greet her too." I froze. I didn't understand what she meant. Then she added, "That's my mother." The air around me suddenly felt heavy. Her mother had been dead for many years. I felt chills run down my spine. My hands started to feel cold. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, staring at that empty rocking chair. Grandma noticed I wasn't moving, and her expression changed. She got angry. She told me not to be rude, that I should show respect. I didn't want to upset her, so, even though I was terrified, I slowly walked toward the chair. My legs felt heavy, like something was pulling me back. I bowed and pretended to greet someone who wasn't there. My voice trembled as I said, "Good afternoon." Grandma smiled again. She looked so happy. She said, "She finally came back." Her voice sounded emotional, like someone who had been reunited with a loved one after a long time. She even said, "I thought I'd never see her again." I didn't say anything after that, but deep inside, fear had already taken over me. I wanted to tell her that maybe what she was seeing wasn't really her mother, but I knew my grandmother. Once she believed in something, there was no changing her mind, so I kept quiet. At first, I told myself, maybe it was just a one-time thing. Maybe, just maybe, her mother's spirit had really come to visit. But the next day, it happened again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every single day, Grandma would talk to that rocking chair, laughing, telling stories, as if someone was really sitting there. It wasn't occasional anymore. It was like she wasn't alone in that house. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I couldn't handle it anymore, so I decided to ask for help. We had a neighbor named Old Man Tom. People in our area knew him as a medium or a healer. I went to him and told him everything, about Grandma, about the rocking chair, about the mother she kept talking to. He listened carefully, then what he told me made things even worse. He said, "Your grandmother might not be seeing her mother." My chest tightened. Then he continued, "That rocking chair isn't what she thinks it is." I was confused. He explained that the original rocking chair, the one that truly belonged to Grandma's mother, had already been destroyed years ago. In fact, he himself had been the one told to throw it away. The chair in our house was something else entirely. It came from an old house up on a hill, a house people feared. It had been abandoned for years because it was believed that something evil lived there. When that house was demolished, Grandma happened to pass by. She saw the rocking chair, and for some reason, she wanted it. Badly. Grandpa didn't agree. He didn't like the idea of bringing something from that place into their home. But Grandma insisted, and eventually, he gave in. When I heard that, everything started to make sense. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me. Why now? Why is it only happening now, after all these years? Old Man Tom looked at me, then said something I'll never forget. "Because your grandmother is getting old." He explained that as people age, their senses change. Their perception becomes different. He said, old people become closer to the spiritual world, the same way children are. And sometimes they begin to see things that others cannot. He called it the opening of the third eye. At that time, my grandmother was already 85 years old. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Fear, confusion, disbelief. But one thing was clear. We needed to do something. Old Man Tom agreed to help, but when he came to our house, Grandma refused. She got angry, saying there was nothing wrong, that her mother was simply visiting. She wouldn't allow him to bless the chair. So Old Man Tom did something else, something I wish I never had to see. Right in front of us, he performed a ritual. The air inside the house suddenly changed. It felt heavy, oppressive, like something was pressing down on my chest. Then slowly, he revealed it. The true form of whatever was sitting on that rocking chair. I couldn't breathe. It was no longer invisible, and it was definitely not her mother. It looked wrong, twisted, grotesque, monstrous. Its shape barely human. Its face something I can't even fully describe. Even Grandma screamed. That was the moment she realized the truth. Old Man Tom didn't hesitate. He drove it out, forcing it away from the chair. The thing resisted, but eventually, it began to break apart, turning into something like dust before being carried away by the wind. And just like that, it was gone. The house felt light again, silent, peaceful. Grandma Jackie was finally at peace. She never spoke to the rocking chair again. And 2 years later, she passed away quietly. This time, I truly believe she finally reunited with her real mother. You can call me Frank. We have an old barrel-type gun, a grease gun, the kind they said was used during wartime. It didn't belong to my family originally. It was said to belong to a relative, a cousin of my grandfather. I never got to meet him. I never even saw a picture of him. So for this story, let's just call him Grandpa Fernand. According to the stories passed down in our family, Grandpa Fernand was once a police officer, a man of authority, a man who carried the law, and a gun. At some point in his life, he ended up staying at my grandfather's house in Texas, my grandfather Sonny. Grandpa Sonny welcomed him without hesitation. After all, they were family. Fernand told him a simple story. He said he had resigned from the force, that he was tired of enforcing the law, tired of the life he had lived. He said he wanted something simpler. He talked about going to Bulacan, buying a small piece of land, planting vegetables, starting over. It sounded peaceful, honest. And so, Grandpa Sonny believed him. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months into years. But something didn't add up. The land, the one he kept talking about, never materialized. There were always excuses, delays, plans that never moved forward. Still, no one questioned him. Until one day, everything changed. Several men arrived at the house. They introduced themselves as police officers, but something about them felt off. They weren't in uniform. Their presence was tense, heavy. They asked for Fernand, and the moment he saw them, he ran. No explanation, no hesitation, just ran. The men chased after him, shouting, drawing their weapons. Gunshots echoed through the street. Neighbors watched from a distance, too afraid to get involved. But somehow, Fernand escaped. He disappeared, just like that. And from that day on, he never came back. Not for his things, not for his family, nothing. It was as if he had vanished from the world. He left everything behind, his clothes, his belongings, and among them, one object that no one dared to claim, the grease gun. It was old, heavy, a submachine gun, the kind used during World War II. At first, it was just stored away, placed inside a box, locked inside a cabinet, hidden from sight, especially from the children. But soon after Fernand disappeared, the truth about him started to surface. Grandpa Sonny began asking questions, trying to understand why those men were after him. What he discovered changed everything. Fernand hadn't simply resigned, he was being hunted. There were cases filed against him, many of them. And according to those records, he had killed innocent people. Not criminals, not enemies, innocent people. And the weapon he used was that same grease gun. From that moment on, the gun was no longer just an object. It became something else. Something wrong. Grandpa Sonny had a belief. He said that when a weapon takes too many lives, it changes. It becomes hot. Not just physically, but spiritually. He said, even if you placed it inside a refrigerator, the metal would still feel warm, as if something inside it refused to cool down. No one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to claim it. They feared it carried something bad. And then, strange things started happening. The gun would move. At first, they thought it was just carelessness. Maybe someone forgot where they placed it. But it kept happening. The cabinet would still be locked, the box untouched, and yet, the gun would appear somewhere else, on a table, in the living room, even out in the open. What made it worse was that it seemed to appear to the children. One time, Grandpa Sonny walked into the room and saw the kids playing, laughing, running around, and in their hands was the gun. They were pretending to shoot each other, pulling the trigger, pointing it like it was a toy. The adults panicked. They rushed to take it away. Thankfully, it never fired. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Even when Grandpa Sonny made sure that all the bullets were removed, the next time it appeared, the magazine was full again. No one admitted touching it. Even when scolded, even when punished, the children all said the same thing. We just found it there, on the table, on the floor, just lying around, as if it wanted to be found, as if it wanted to be used. That's when fear truly settled into the house. Grandpa Sonny decided to get rid of it. He tried to sell the gun, but every buyer refused, especially those who understood firearms. The moment they held it, they felt it. The heat, the weight, not just physical, but something deeper. They all said the same thing. That gun carries something bad. It has taken too many lives, and whatever is attached to it is still there. Some even said the souls of those who died were still clinging to it, demanding justice. After that, no one wanted it. But the gun didn't stop. It kept appearing, kept moving, as if it refused to stay hidden, as if it had a purpose. Eventually, Grandpa Sonny made a decision. He flew across seas and he entrusted the gun to a traditional healer, someone who could deal with things that normal people couldn't. The healer took the gun and performed rituals on it, cleansing, blessing, something beyond what the family understood. And after that, everything stopped. No more movement, no more appearances, no more fear. The house finally returned to normal. But before the healer left, he said something that stayed with my family forever. He said, "This gun is not just cursed, it is searching for the soul of its owner," which could only mean one thing. Grandpa Fernand was still alive, somewhere out there, hiding, running, and the weapon that had taken so many lives was still waiting for him. Eventually, the healer left and contact with him was lost. The gun was never seen again. And as for Grandpa Fernand, no one ever heard from him ever again. I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, somewhere, and if one day that gun will find its way back to him. My name is Gia. Good evening to everyone listening, and a special shout out to my boyfriend Leon. He always listens to stories like this with me, even though he gets scared easily. This story is about my best friend. Her name was Risa. We've known each other for as long as I can remember. Since preschool, we were already classmates, always in the same section, always sitting near each other. And every day after class, we would walk home together. Sometimes we even held hands while walking, not because it meant anything romantic, but because that was just how close we were. Risa was the quiet one. I was the complete opposite. I talked too much. I joked around. I got into trouble because of it. And whenever someone picked on me, Risa was the one who stepped in. She didn't say much, but when she did, people listened. And if words weren't enough, she wasn't afraid to fight for me. That's why I always felt safe when I was with her. We stayed like that all the way through high school. Her aunt was one of the teachers, so somehow, we always ended up in the same class. Looking back now, I realize Risa wasn't just my best friend. She was like a sister to me. Our families knew each other well. She was close to my parents, and I was close to hers. Some people even teased us, saying we were too close. We just laughed it off, because we knew what we had. But then, college came, and for the first time, we were separated. Different schools, different courses, different routines. At first it was hard. Everything felt incomplete. But we made a promise. We would still see each other every weekend. And we did. No matter how busy things got, we always made time. She would text me randomly, "Hey, I miss your nonsense jokes." And I'd reply with something even more ridiculous just to make her laugh. On my birthday, she gave me a gift, a pair of tennis shoes. She said, "You can use these when you jog." I remember how happy I was, not because of the shoes, but because it came from her. From that day on, I wore those shoes everywhere. They became my favorite. Every time I wore them, I felt like a part of her was with me. After we graduated, things slowly began to change. Risa's family moved to a new house, far away. When she told me, we both cried. It felt like something was being taken away from us. But she promised. She said she would still message me every day. At first, she did. Then life got busy. Messages became shorter, then less frequent, until one day, they stopped. I didn't even notice when we lost contact. It just happened, silently. Then one day, I received news that completely broke me. Risa was gone. I couldn't believe it. It didn't feel real. I wanted to go to her wake, but I couldn't. Her house was too far, and I couldn't leave work. So I called her parents instead. They said they understood. That night, I cried harder than I ever had before. I cried until my chest hurt, until I couldn't breathe properly, until I fell asleep from exhaustion. By that time, the shoes she gave me were already old, worn out, damaged. I had tried to have them repaired, but the cobbler said they couldn't be fixed anymore. I couldn't throw them away. So I kept them in the storage room, because to me, they weren't just shoes. They were a memory. That night, I suddenly woke up. I don't know what time it was. Everything was quiet. But I felt something warm, as if someone was holding me. I turned to look, but no one was there. I sat up slowly, and that's when I saw them. The shoes. The same shoes Risa gave me. They were on the floor, inside my room. My heart started pounding. No one could have brought them there. No one had any reason to. I stood up, slowly, carefully, and just as I was about to pick them up, they moved. They walked. Not dragged, not pushed. They walked, like someone invisible was wearing them. Step by step, toward the door, out of my room. I didn't want to follow. Every part of me was scared. But somehow, I did. I followed them down the hallway, my heart pounding with every step. They turned and entered the storage room. When I reached the doorway, I saw them again. They were already inside, placed neatly beside the other old shoes, as if nothing had happened. I just stood there, frozen, trying to understand what I had just seen. Was I dreaming? Was I imagining things? Then I remembered something. When I woke up earlier, it felt like someone tapped me, gently, the way Risa used to. That's when it hit me. It was her. Risa came back, not to scare me, not to hurt me, but to say goodbye. I went back to my room, and I cried again. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't just pain anymore. There was something else, something peaceful. A few months later, I finally had the chance to visit her grave. I brought the shoes with me, the same ones she gave me. I lit a candle and sat there quietly. Then I spoke. I told her, no matter how much time passes, no matter how far life takes me, I will never forget her. Some people, even after they're gone, never really leave. My name is Arlen. Good evening, Sir Bob, and to everyone listening to your channel. What I'm about to share is something that has stayed with me since childhood. Even now, I still avoid thinking about it too much, because the more I remember, the more it feels like something is quietly watching. This story is about the mirror in the basement of our house. When I was still a child, I had already seen that mirror, but not up close, never up close. It was kept inside a cabinet, placed high on the wall, so high that even the tallest adult in our house couldn't reach it without a ladder. To us children, it might as well have been on the ceiling. Sometimes, when I stood directly underneath it, I could see just a small portion of its surface, a faint reflection, distorted, almost like water. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never see my full face. And maybe that was a good thing. Our mother had one strict rule. No one, under any circumstances, was allowed to climb up to that cabinet. She didn't explain why. She didn't soften her tone. She simply said, "Whoever I catch trying to reach that mirror will be thrown out of this house." As children, that was more than enough to scare us. We never questioned it. We never dared to test her. But fear doesn't erase curiosity. In fact, it makes it stronger. As I grew older, that curiosity stayed with me. It didn't fade like childish fears usually do. Instead, it became something deeper, something heavier. Why was the mirror hidden like that? Why keep it at all if no one was allowed to use it? Why not just throw it away? Was it valuable? Was it cursed? Or was there something about it that my mother didn't want us to know? Years passed. We grew up. Some of my siblings moved out. The house became quieter, but that cabinet and that mirror never moved. It stayed exactly where it had always been, untouched, unopened, waiting. I was already 24 years old when I finally decided to ask. I told myself I wasn't a child anymore. I deserved to know. One evening, while my mother was resting, I sat beside her, and I asked about the mirror. At first, she didn't answer. She just looked at me, longer than usual, as if deciding whether I was ready. Then she sighed and said, "If I tell you, you must promise me one thing. Never try to look into it." I agreed, without hesitation. And that's when she told me everything. The mirror didn't originally belong to her. It belonged to my grandmother. According to my grandmother bought it from a woman who went around town selling random items. Clothes, tools, old furniture, things that looked like they came from different places. The mirror was one of those items, and what caught my grandmother's attention was the price. It was unusually cheap, too cheap for something that looked so well made. The frame was old, but elegant, dark wood, carved with strange patterns, not floral, not decorative, something else, something unfamiliar. Still, she bought it. At first, nothing seemed wrong. She placed it in their kitchen, where everyone could use it. Days passed, then weeks, then months, and slowly, something began to change. Not with the mirror, but with someone in the house. My uncle, Roland. He was only 14 at the time, quiet, normal, just like any other teenager. Until the mirror arrived. At first, it was harmless. He would stand in front of it, fixing his hair, checking his face, like most teenagers do. But then, it became more frequent, too frequent. Whenever he was home, he was in front of that mirror, standing, staring, sometimes for hours. Then my mother and her siblings noticed something else, something unsettling. Roland wasn't just looking at himself anymore. He was talking. At first, it sounded like normal self-talk, whispering, mumbling. But then, he started laughing at nothing. Then suddenly, his expression would change. He would frown, his face would twist into anger, as if he was arguing with someone. But there was no one there. My grandmother scolded him, told him to stop, told him he was being strange. But it didn't matter. Roland kept going back, again and again and again. They thought it was just a phase, something he would grow out of. They were wrong. One afternoon, he was left alone in the house. When everyone returned, they found him, lying on the floor, unmoving. My grandfather rushed to him, checked his pulse. Nothing. He was already dead. No signs of struggle, no wounds, no explanation. But when they looked at the mirror, they noticed something. It was shining. Not reflecting light, not like glass normally does. It was glowing from within, as if something inside it was alive. They rushed Roland to the hospital, but it was too late. After he was buried, my grandmother finally accepted that something was wrong. She called for a medium. The moment the medium saw the mirror, he stepped back. He didn't touch it, he didn't go near it. He just stared and said, "That is not an ordinary mirror. It was made for something else." He believed it had been created by a witch, used for rituals, or worse, to trap something. He warned them, the mirror should never be used again. It should not be given away, because it would only bring harm to others. And most importantly, it should never be destroyed. Because if it breaks, everything inside it, everything it has taken, would be released. After that, my grandmother hid it, far from sight, far from reach. Years later, when she passed away, my mother took responsibility for it. That's why it ended up in our house, in the basement, inside that cabinet. High enough so no one could accidentally look into it. After hearing all of this, I didn't know what to say. Everything suddenly made sense. The warning, the fear, the secrecy. But at the same time, it made things worse. Because now, I knew. And once you know something like that, you can't unknow it. From that day on, I never looked at the mirror the same way again. Even just passing by the basement felt different, heavier, like something above me was waiting, watching. Sometimes I wonder if someone or something is still inside that mirror, waiting for someone else to look. And because of that, I will never try to climb that cabinet. I will never look into that mirror, because I might end up just like Uncle Roland. Hello to everyone listening to 3 a.m. Tales. I hope you're doing well, or at least still brave enough to be here at this hour. My name is Marlon, but you can just call me Lynn. What I'm about to share with you is something that happened in my childhood, something I didn't fully understand back then, but something that still gives me chills whenever I remember it. At first, it felt like nothing more than a strange memory. But over time, I realized it might have been something else entirely. And I'll let you decide what you think it was. I grew up in a simple home with my parents. Nothing fancy, just a quiet neighborhood where everybody knew each other, and where nights felt longer than they should. My mother had a sister, my aunt, whose name was Jaimelin. She was the kind of person who never stayed still, always thinking of business, always trying something new. If one thing didn't work, she'd move on and start another without hesitation. One of her most successful businesses was a thrift shop. It wasn't just a small store either. It had everything: secondhand clothes, shoes, bags, accessories, furniture. If someone needed something cheap but usable, they went there. And for almost 8 years, it did really well. People came and went every day. The shop was always full. My aunt was proud of it. But as time passed, things changed. She started getting tired. Not physically, maybe, but mentally. She wanted something different, something bigger. Eventually, she decided to close the thrift shop. And when she made that decision, everything was packed up and sold off. Almost everything. Except for one thing, the mannequins. According to my mother, there were originally 10 mannequins in the shop. They weren't cheap display mannequins either. They were life-sized, slightly worn, the kind that always looked a little too real under certain lighting. But during the closing process, some were damaged, some were given away, and others were discarded. In the end, only 3 remained. My aunt didn't know what to do with them, so she brought them to our house and left them there temporarily. My mother said we might still be able to use them someday. So we stored them in our old storage room. It was a small space beside the house where we kept unused furniture, broken appliances, and things we thought we might need someday. That's where the 3 mannequins ended up. Standing there quietly, facing the wall, covered in dust. At first, I didn't think much of it. They were just plastic figures, right? But there was something about them that always felt off. Maybe it was the way they looked too human from a distance. Or maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Still, I avoided that storage room whenever I could. Now you need to understand something about our house. Our bathroom was not inside the main house. It was outside. To get there, you had to go through the kitchen, then walk along a short path. At night, it wasn't exactly scary, but it wasn't comforting either. The kitchen light stayed on, and there were small lights along the path, so visibility wasn't a problem. Still, something about it always felt quiet in a strange way. Too quiet. One night I woke up suddenly. I don't know what time it was, but it was deep into the night, and I immediately knew I needed to go to the bathroom. I sat up slowly and got out of bed. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I walked out of my room, through the hallway, into the kitchen. Everything was normal. But as I stepped closer to the door outside, I felt something I can't explain. Not fear, more like awareness. Like my body knew something before my mind did. Still, I went out. The path was lit. The air was cool. Everything looked normal. So I kept walking. And eventually, I reached the bathroom. When I got inside, I didn't fully close the door. I just wanted to finish quickly. I sat down, and that's when it happened. From where I was sitting, I could see the storage room. There was a window with a mesh screen, and the kitchen light lit part of the yard. At first, everything looked normal. But then I noticed something. Something moved. Inside the storage room, a mannequin shifted. I froze. I stared harder, and then I saw it clearly. All 3 mannequins were moving, not falling, not being touched, moving on their own. One turned slight, another stepped forward, and the third looked like it was hugging the other one. My entire body went cold. A deep chill spread from my head down to my feet. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just sat there staring. And then I closed my eyes. Hard. Like if I didn't see it, it wouldn't exist. I stayed like that for a moment, maybe longer. Then I stood up so fast, I almost fell. I didn't finish. I didn't flush. I just ran. I ran straight back into the house, through the kitchen, down the hallway, into my room, and I hid under the blanket. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would wake everyone up. But no one came. The next morning, I told my mother what I saw. At first, she didn't believe me. But then, she stopped. And she said something I didn't expect. She had seen them move too. Not clearly, not often, but enough to question it. and hearing my story confirmed it for her. Months passed. Then a storm hit. Heavy rain, flooding, rising water, and eventually it reached the storage room. Everything inside was carried away, including the mannequins. We didn't try to save them. We just let it go. My mother said something that stuck with me. At least now, we won't be afraid of that room anymore. I still wonder, were they really just mannequins? Or was there something else, using them? Either way, I never looked at mannequins the same again. And I never will. Hello everyone. I was still a child when these strange events happened, but even now, I remember them clearly. Some memories fade over time, but these stayed, like they didn't want to be forgotten. I'll start with what happened to my older cousin. It was a hot day, the kind where the air feels heavy and everything moves slower than usual. Around noon, the sun was at its peak. You could barely stay outside without feeling drained. Our grandmother suddenly said it would be nice to have halo halo, something cold, something refreshing. But there was a problem. We didn't have any of the ingredients at home, and no one really wanted to go out in that heat. She didn't directly ask anyone, but the way she said it, it felt like she was hinting, waiting for someone to volunteer. After a few seconds of silence, my older cousin stood up. He said he would go. Even though the sun was unbearable, he grabbed my father's bicycle and left. The place where he needed to go was more than a kilometer away. A long ride, especially under that heat. He eventually reached the store, bought ice and all the ingredients, and started heading back home. Everything was normal at first. The road was quiet. The field stretched out on both sides. Nothing unusual. But then, something felt wrong. While he was pedaling, he noticed that he wasn't getting anywhere. He kept pushing harder on the pedals, but it felt like the bicycle wasn't moving at all. At first, he thought maybe the chain was stuck, or the wheels were caught on something. But when he looked down, everything seemed normal. Still, he wasn't moving. That's when he slowly turned his head and looked behind him. And what he saw made his blood run cold. There was a man standing behind him, wearing a soldier's uniform. The man was tall, fair-skinned, and smiling. But it wasn't a normal smile. There was something unsettling about it, because the man was holding the back of the bicycle, lifting it, just enough so the wheels couldn't touch the ground. That's why he couldn't move. My cousin said in that moment, he didn't know what to do. He couldn't scream. He couldn't even think properly. So he did the only thing he could. He prayed, over and over, trying to focus, trying not to look back again. Seconds passed, maybe longer. Then suddenly, he felt the bicycle drop. The wheels touched the ground again. He was moving. He didn't look back anymore. He just pedaled as fast as he could, faster than he ever had before, until he finally reached home. But when he arrived, he couldn't speak. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. We knew something was wrong immediately. The strange part was, the ice he bought hadn't melted. After he calmed down, he told us everything. Our grandmother listened quietly. Then she said something that made the story even more unsettling. She said, maybe what he saw was a soldier, someone who died during the war, when Americans and Japanese soldiers fought in that area. A soldier who was never properly buried. We all went silent after that. But what we didn't know was that it wasn't the only strange thing that would happen that day. Later that afternoon, around 3 p.m., our neighbor twins came home from school. Our house was the first one they would pass before reaching theirs, because the houses in our area were far apart, surrounded by open fields. When they arrived, we immediately noticed something was wrong. They looked terrified. Their faces were pale, just like my cousin earlier. They were trembling. We asked them what happened, and slowly, they told us. While they were walking home, They were playing like they always did, laughing, pushing each other, not a single worry in their minds, until they reached a bend in the road, the path that led into our village. That's when something caught their attention, something shiny, on the side of the road. They squinted, trying to see it clearly, and as they got closer, they saw it. 2 golden cups. They were sitting on top of a tree stump. The cups looked old, ancient even, but they were shining like they were newly made. The twins got excited. They thought maybe the cups were meant for them, because there were exactly 2, one for each of them. But then they started arguing. One cup had a lion design, the other had a coiled snake, and both of them wanted the lion. They kept pushing each other, laughing, arguing, completely distracted, until suddenly someone called one of their names. Clear, close. The twin who heard it responded immediately and looked around, but there was no one there. The road was empty. The fields were still. Then, a voice suddenly cursed, loud, angry. That's when fear hit them. They slowly turned their attention back to the golden cups, and what they saw next, they will never forget. The cups started to blur, as if they weren't real. Slowly, they faded until they completely disappeared, gone. That's when the twins screamed and ran home as fast as they could, trembling, crying. And when we all sat down and talked about what happened, we realized something. The place where my cousin saw the soldier was the exact same place where the twins saw the golden cups. After that, no one wanted to pass that road alone anymore. Whatever was there wasn't just showing itself once. It was waiting, watching, and maybe choosing who to appear to next. Hi, Sir Bob. Call me Peter. I'm about to share something that changed the way I see my family, and the things that may have been watching us all along. I didn't grow up believing in the supernatural. To me, stories about creatures, curses, and things lurking in the dark were just that. Stories. Things told to scare children. Nothing more. But that changed the moment my grandfather told me the truth. Before all of that, everything in my life felt normal. I met a woman named Remy, and from the moment I met her, I just knew. You ever meet someone and feel like everything just fits? Like you don't have to try too hard to understand each other? That's what it was like with her. She was kind, smart, and somehow perfectly matched with me in every way. It didn't take long before I decided she was the one I wanted to marry. When I introduced Remy to my family, everything went well. They liked her immediately. Even my grandfather, who was usually quiet and hard to impress. But that day, he said something strange. He told me, "If you're going to build a house, don't move too far away from us." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I just assumed maybe he didn't want me to be too far away. Maybe he was just worried about getting older. So I agreed. Months later, when Remy and I finally got our own house, I followed what my grandfather said. The house was only about 30 minutes away from them, close enough for visits, but still far enough to start our own life. When my grandfather found out, he looked relieved. Not just happy, relieved. At the time, I didn't understand why. We planned a house blessing, a simple gathering, family, food, laughter. And during that same day, we shared another piece of news. Remy was pregnant. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. Our family was finally growing. Everyone celebrated. Everyone smiled. But my grandfather, he was different. He was happy, yes, but there was something else in his expression. Something heavy. Before he left that day, he pulled me aside. He told me to visit him, alone. 2 days later, I went to his house. When I arrived, my cousins were playing inside, but my grandfather immediately told them to go outside. That alone made me uneasy. Then he called me into his room, closed the door, and that's when he told me everything. He said, our family carried something dangerous, something old. He told me our ancestors were enemies of the Skinwalker. Not just ordinary enemies, but hunters. One of them was known for killing many of these creatures, and because of that, our bloodline was cursed. He said, every child born into our family would be hunted, targeted, killed before they could grow. When he said that, I felt my chest tighten, because Remy was already pregnant. My child was already marked. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I should believe him. But then he looked at me, seriously, and said, don't be afraid. As long as I'm here, they won't touch your child. Then he reached under his bed and pulled out a box. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was something I didn't expect. A whip, made from a stingray's tail. He told me it had been used before, in battles, against skinwalkers. Then he gave me instructions. Every night, before going to sleep, I had to walk around the house and strike the ground 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times. It would serve as a warning, a message to anything hiding in the dark. I didn't question him anymore, because something inside me told me this wasn't just a story. So every night, I followed what he said. Before sleeping, I stepped outside, held the whip tightly, and struck the ground. 1, 2, 3. At first, nothing happened. But as the days passed, things started to change. When Remy reached her 8th month, I began noticing something. Animals. Not normal behavior. They would appear from a distance, just watching our house. Not moving, not making sounds, just staring. When I told my grandfather, he didn't look surprised. He simply said, those aren't just animals. They're watching. They're waiting. That's when I realized this was real. The day Remy went into labor, my grandfather and my father came to our house. They didn't say it directly, but I knew why they were there. To guard us. That night, the air felt different. Heavy. Still. Like something was out there, just beyond what we could see. At one point, we saw a large dog, standing far from the house. It didn't bark, didn't move closer. It just stared, but not at me, at my grandfather. They looked at each other, as if they understood something, without speaking. Then slowly, the dog turned and walked away. Not long after, Remy gave birth, safely. Our baby was a boy. When I held him for the first time, I couldn't stop myself from crying. Not just because I was happy, but because I knew we made it through something unseen, something that had been waiting, and somehow we survived it. To this day, I still follow what my grandfather taught me, because some things don't stop watching. They just wait for the moment you stop believing they're there. Good day, Sir Bob, and to everyone listening. You can call me Ali. What I'm about to share is not just a story. It's something that has been passed down in our family for generations. Something we don't fully understand, but have learned to respect. This story is about an old dagger, a dagger that has been kept by my uncle, Larry. At first glance, it looks ordinary, old, worn, like something you'd find in an antique shop. But according to my family, that dagger is far from ordinary. It is said to be very old, so old that its origins trace back to the time of our ancestors. There are even stories that its first owner lived during the time of World War II. Whether our ancestor fought alongside him or simply lived during that era, no one really knows anymore. His name has long been forgotten, lost to time. So in our family, we simply call him Grandpa Dan, and the story of the dagger begins with him. When Grandpa Dan was still young, he fell in love with a woman, but he wasn't the only one. There was something else, something not human, also courting her. An elemental being, a tall, dark, tree-dwelling creature, known for its strength and its temper. And because Grandpa Dan was competing for the same woman, the elemental being grew angry. At first, it only watched him, waiting, following him at night. But then, it became more aggressive. One night, the elemental being finally confronted him. It grabbed him, lifted him, and hung him upside down from a tree, helpless. If not for his screams echoing through the night, no one would have found him. He was rescued, but the damage had already been done. The woman he loved became afraid, not of him, but for him. And for his safety, she rejected him. That rejection changed him. Grandpa Dan became consumed with anger, not toward the woman, but toward the elemental being. He wanted revenge, but he knew he couldn't fight it unprepared. So he began to study. He searched for ways to kill an elemental being. Old rituals, ancient practices, protective charms. No one knows exactly what he did, or how long it took. But eventually, he was ready. And he faced the elemental being. Whether he fought it alone or with others, no one can say for sure. There are rumors that many people helped him, because the creature had already begun terrorizing others. But one thing is certain, the elemental being died. And what happened after is what makes this story even more disturbing. Instead of burying the creature, they shaved its body. The thick, coarse hair was collected and divided among the people. It was believed to be powerful, a protection against curses and dark forces. But Grandpa Dan didn't stop there. He wanted more. He cut the body apart and took its bones. From those bones, he created objects, handles for daggers, weapons, tools. He even carved medallions used as amulets. Over time, Grandpa Dan became wealthy. People sought him out, buying the items, believing in their power. Some even tried to steal from him, but no one ever succeeded. It was said that the bones themselves protected him. Years passed, generations changed, and slowly, those items disappeared, lost, sold, or forgotten, until only one remained, the dagger, the one now kept by my uncle, Larry. It is said that the dagger still carries power, a protective force. My uncle keeps it behind their door, hidden, but always there. And strange things have happened around their home. There was a time when a group, almost like a cult, was going around our area at night. They would knock on doors, harass families, cause fear. House after house, people were disturbed, but not theirs. Their house was never touched, as if something was keeping those people away. Even during strong typhoons, when roofs were torn apart and homes were damaged, their house remained standing, untouched. There was even one incident that everyone still talks about. A large mango tree was uprooted during a storm. It was falling directly toward their house. They were sure it would crush everything. But somehow, the tree shifted, changed direction, and fell away from the house. No one could explain it. But in our family, we believe the dagger protected them. Even so, my uncle always reminds us of one thing. He says, everything comes from God, and that whatever protection we receive is still guided by Him. As for me, I'll be honest, Sir Bob, I want that dagger someday. Not because of greed, but because it's part of our history, our bloodline. But I also understand that it's not something you take lightly, because objects like that don't just protect. Sometimes they choose who they belong to. So I won't force it. But deep down, I still hope that one day it will be passed on to me. Good day, Sir Bob, and to all the people listening. My name is Ethan. I'm 28 years old, and I currently live in Manhattan. I work as a truck driver for a printing company, delivering supplies. What I'm about to share isn't exactly a horror story, at least not in the usual sense. It's about my grandparents, and something that, even now, I don't fully know how to explain. When my grandfather was still alive, he had a favorite spot in their house, a rocking chair. It was placed right beside a window, where the air would always pass through gently. It was cool there, peaceful. That was where he spent most of his time, sitting, rocking slowly, reading his books. Even when his eyesight started to weaken, he never stopped reading. He would hold the book closer, squint his eyes, but he kept going. That chair became part of him, or maybe he became part of that chair. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away. It was due to a serious illness, something that slowly took his strength away. I won't go into details, but losing him was not easy for any of us, especially for my grandmother. They had spent most of their lives together, and suddenly, he was gone. After the burial, my grandmother did something that stayed with me. She moved the rocking chair into their bedroom. She said it helped her remember him, the way he would sit there, reading quietly, rocking gently. It brought her comfort. 2 years passed. Life moved on, at least on the surface. Every time I visited their house, I would always notice that rocking chair. It was getting old, very old. The wood looked weak. The joints were loose. Honestly, it looked like it could break at any moment. So we told my grandmother to throw it away. We were worried. She might get hurt if it collapsed. But she refused. She said she wasn't even using it anymore. It was just there. Eventually, we stopped insisting. We thought maybe she just wasn't ready to let it go. Then one afternoon, while I was visiting, she called me into her room. Her voice was quiet, almost like she didn't want anyone else to hear. She asked me, "Are you easily scared?" I smiled a little and said no. But deep down, I didn't know why she was asking. Then she told me what happened the night before. She said, when my grandfather was still alive, he made her a promise that even after he died, he would still come back to visit her. At first, she thought it was just something people say, a way to comfort each other. And over time, she believed he had forgotten about it. But he didn't. That night, she was alone in her room, praying the rosary. Everything was quiet, calm. Then suddenly, she felt a cold wind, Not from the window, not from a fan, from nowhere. And just like that, the candle flames went out. The room became dark, silent. And then, she heard it. A soft, creaking sound. She turned slowly toward the rocking chair and saw it moving, back and forth, on its own. She didn't scream, she just stared at it, as if a part of her already knew what was about to happen. Then slowly, a figure began to form, faint at first, like a shadow, and then clearer. It was my grandfather, sitting on the chair, holding a book, wearing the same clothes he was buried in. He looked at her and smiled. Not a frightening smile, a familiar one, a gentle one, the same smile she had seen for years. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just watched him. For a few minutes, they stayed like that, together, like nothing had changed. And then, slowly, he faded, until he was gone, just like that. After that, my grandmother broke down. She cried the whole night, not out of fear, but something deeper, something I couldn't fully understand until I saw her that day. She was still crying when she finished telling me the story. So I hugged her, and in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't afraid. She was grateful. She told me she believed my grandfather truly loved her, because even after death, he kept his promise. He came back. Until now, my grandmother is still alive, and she says my grandfather has visited her 3 times already, always the same way, through that rocking chair. And maybe that's why she still seems strong, still full of energy, still smiling. Because somewhere in that quiet room with that old rocking chair, she knows she's not alone.
Good afternoon, Sir Bob.
You can call me Vienne. What I'm about to share is something from our family, something that has been passed down for generations. At first, it may not sound like a horror story, but the more you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. This is about my mother's jewelry, or more specifically, the jewelry that watches. Before anything else, I want to make one thing clear. We are not rich. These are not luxurious collections bought from expensive stores. They are simply inherited pieces, passed down from my mother's grandmother, then to my grandmother, then to my mother, and someday they will be passed on to my older sister. It is just one set, nothing more. A pair of gold earrings, a necklace, a ring, a bracelet, a brooch, and a hairpin that was once part of the collection, but that hairpin was lost, pawned during a time when my family was struggling, and never redeemed. That was long before I was born, but the reason I call these jewelry pieces haunted is because of something that happened years ago, something that changed how our family sees them forever. Before my mother met my father, she had another partner. For the sake of this story, let's call him Augustine. According to my mother, Augustine used to blame her for something painful. He told her she couldn't have children, that she was infertile, and for a long time, she believed him. But later, the truth came out. It was actually him who couldn't have children. Because after they separated, my mother met my father. And now, we are 6 siblings. Back then, my mother was already the one taking care of the jewelry. She kept it safe, hidden, protected, until one day, something went wrong. She checked her things, and the jewelry box was gone. Just gone. She searched the entire house, every corner, every drawer, but it wasn't there. So she asked Augustine. At first, he acted like it didn't matter, like it was nothing. But then, something changed. He suddenly became nervous, frantic. He started searching too, but something about it felt forced. Then they discovered something else. Money was missing. My mother was surprised, because she didn't even know Augustine had money saved. It wasn't a large amount, but it was gone. That's when they realized they had been robbed. My mother was heartbroken, but my grandmother stayed calm. She simply said, "The truth will come out. Those jewelry pieces do not sleep." My mother didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. Days passed. Then one day, a package arrived from USPS. Inside was the jewelry. All of it. Returned. My mother felt relieved, happy. She wanted to tell Augustine immediately, but he was gone. He had disappeared from their apartment. No message, no explanation. Back then, there were no phones, no easy way to contact him. Then later, a letter arrived from Augustine, and everything finally made sense. He confessed. He was the one who stole the jewelry. And the money? It was never stolen, because he never had any money at all. He made that story up to hide what he had done. He admitted he pawned the jewelry because he was desperate. But after doing it, something started happening to him. He began seeing things everywhere he went. An old woman watching him, staring with anger in her eyes. Sometimes she wasn't alone. There was something with her, a strange creature with burning eyes. The old woman never spoke, but she kept pointing at her ears, her neck, her wrists, her fingers, again and again. That's when he understood. She was pointing to the jewelry. He didn't tell my mother, but deep down, he already knew. It was connected. His original plan was to use the money and run away with another woman. But he couldn't go through with it. The visions wouldn't stop. They followed him, watched him, until he had no choice. He redeemed the jewelry and returned it. My mother was devastated when she learned the truth, not just because of the theft, but because of the betrayal. She realized she had been deceived for a long time. But somehow, life had a different plan. Because after everything, she met my father and proved that she was never the problem. As for Augustine, we never heard from him again. No one knows what happened to him, but my grandmother seemed satisfied. She told us something that made everything even more chilling. She said the old woman Augustine saw was actually her grandmother, the original owner, and the creature beside her was not random. It was the bird design carved into the jewelry itself. That's what she meant when she said, "The jewelry does not sleep." It isn't evil. It doesn't harm without reason, but it watches, and it appears to those who do wrong. My mother told my sister that when the jewelry is passed to her, she must take care of it. She can pawn it if she really needs to, but she must ask permission, because somehow it understands. But there's one thing we never truly found out, something even my grandmother couldn't fully explain. What exactly is inside those pieces? And why did it choose to stay there? Because whatever it is, it doesn't just protect, it watches. And maybe it always has.
Every story hides a shadow. Dive into the unknown with the 3 a.m. Tales, where true horror, twisted fates, and chilling mysteries are brought to life. Each episode whispers what you were never meant to hear. New stories every week. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen, if you dare.